Hey everybody, welcome back to TheEndStep.com. We're doing another Scholars sanctioned vintage event thanks to Dave Tassinari over at Scholars Bookstore and Games. I'd like to thank TheEndStep for recording, making this all possible. I'd like to thank Scholars for hosting the event. My name is Matt Orfanello here with Eric Dupuis.
Thrilled to be here for this one. We've got Adrian Becker using Robot Affinities, a deck that he put on the map in Paper Magic, and Oliver Beaumont playing Bomberman, a deck that he's been championing for years. Now, this is the match that you'd expect to see in the top 8 of a vintage tournament. These guys are both very successful vintage players. They've done very well in high-profile events, and we are starting out round 1 with it. That is just the breaks for these two. Someone's going to go away with a win, marching toward top 8, and someone's going to have a much harder road. I really like both of these lists. We've touched on Adrian's before. It's very explosive, has a lot of plays that they can just come out of nowhere, and it has the ability to stop your opponent from going anywhere with something like a first turn lodestone and completely locking them out.
Right, and I mean just the card advantage with the Skull Clamp and Genesis Chamber, being able to just draw, which most artifact decks in this format don't have the ability to generate card advantage like that.
I'll tell you an interesting fact about Adrian's list, which not everybody knows. People have been bringing in Leyline of the Void in practice versus it because they figure it'll stop the modular trigger from Arcbound Ravager and it will stop Skull Clamp. Well, the reality is Genesis Chamber makes tokens, and Leyline of the Void removes cards that go to graveyards. So he's still able to combo out through Leyline using Skull Clamp with the tokens from Genesis Chamber. Rest in Peace would have stopped it, but it's a very little known interaction and something that could really catch people off guard. The deck is much more resilient than people realize.
That goes deep. So let's talk a little bit about Bomberman.
I love this list. Now I'm in between 2 lists in vintage. Right now I'm leaning toward Grixis. I think it's the best choice, and it really comes down to Swords of Plowshares versus Lightning Bolt. If you're on the side of the debate that says Swords is where you want to be, then Bomberman is probably the list for you. There's Esper and Blue-White having a little bit more resilient of a mana base, and his list runs 4 mana drain. Now, that's not where I want to be, but it's very much the type of player Ollie is. He likes to have the mana drains sit behind them. He's comfortable throwing drains at less important spells just to try and get the tempo play. I find that can set you up for traps where you end up tapping off and then losing to a bomb, and I've been able to run that past that type of play style many times. But it can be good if you get a very mana-heavy draw where you've got multiple mana drains in a counter war. Now, what this deck looks to do, for those who are unfamiliar, is use Auriok Salvagers with Black Lotus to create infinite mana. You can sack it for 3 white, return it for 2 white, so you're netting a white every single time. From there, you're able to draw your entire deck with one of the spell bombs. Ollie's using Aether Spellbomb. That's the one that bounces creatures, so it's an answer to Blightsteel, Colossus, as well as being able to pick up your own creatures and get extra value out of them. I prefer Nile Spellbomb because that disrupts the opponent, extremely positive versus Dredge, and is really good versus the tougher matchups like Storm. There's also lists that run Pyrite Spellbomb, not as popular anymore.
And I see a lot of like classic vintage control. I mean, I'm a legacy player, but doing these videos I've sort of developed an idea of what vintage control lists sort of look like, and he has a lot of the classic pieces like Tinker for Blightsteel, Time Vault Voltaic Key, Jace the Mind Sculptor, just a lot of ways to control the game without comboing off.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful deck, and it's got the most powerful cards in Vintage. We'll see how it holds up to some of the less scary-looking cards, like Memnite and Signal Pest. We'll see here with a first turn Tinker.
First turn Tinker.
Looks like Blightsteel, yeah.
Yep.
So Adrian's going to need a Tangle Wire, most likely, to tap that down. He really doesn't have too many other ways of dealing with it in his list. Now, if he's able to get enough toughness in front of it, I mean, that can slow down the death, but it's really hard to race and hold back that much toughness on board.
And sorry.
I think this is most likely over. We'll see where Adrian's able to go.
Well, from the looks of it, I don't think he has another mana source in his hand because he didn't play a land and he only played a single Mox. So maybe he has a Sol Ring, but that's...
I agree. This is a really bad spot. This could be a fast one. Yeah, Tinker Blightsteel is something that I've been happy to have in my list lately. Exactly for that type of reason, versus the decks that are using spheres, the fish decks, all of the decks that are trying to play a more fair game. it gives you an extremely explosive hand. I wouldn't be surprised if Ollie had a Force of Will in that hand, which would have completely locked it up. Those are very attractive hands. They're a little bit scary when it's just Tinker Blightsteel because those decks are prepared to stop it, but very rarely are they going to have 2 cards that will actually break up that first turn play.
Interesting. So in Ollie's sideboard, he's got 3 Rest in Peace, 4 Swords to Plowshares, 4 Disenchant, 1 Devout Witness, 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Engineered Explosives, and an Elspeth Knight Errant. Now, what do you think he's bringing Elspeth in against?
It's good versus opposing Jaces. Bomberman has a ton of creatures. You don't really think about Trinket Mage as a creature all the time, but he's running 4 of them along with 2 Vendilion Clicks, 2 Salvagers. Now, he's not running black, so he doesn't have access to Dark Confidant, but Elspeth is going to allow those guys to jump, smash a Jace, or just end the game as quickly as possible. I'd imagine Blightsteel even gets wings on occasion.
So in this matchup, I mean, he's probably bringing in the 4 Disenchant, 4 Swords to Plowshares, and Devout Witness.
And Engineered Explosives. That's going to mop up tokens, and it's one of the best cards versus Sphere effects. One thing that people don't realize about Explosives is if they have a couple of spheres out, you can play it at 0 and then pay a blue and a white for the extra cost, and it comes in with those Sunburst counters. So you're effectively getting it at 2, but you're only paying the minimum amount of mana. It's not like you have to pay 2 and then an additional 2. All it's going to check is how many different colored manas did you use. I love that card. That's one of the things that pushes me toward Bomberman is how good Engineered Explosives is in it. And it also lets you combo out. People also are not usually aware that Engineered Explosives plus Sensei's Divining Top lets you draw your whole deck when you have the Salvagers combo. What you do is you tap the top to draw, respond by blowing explosives at 1, and you end up netting a card off of that because the top gets put in the graveyard instead of on top of the deck, and then you just repeat that indefinitely until you've got as many cards as you need to win.
That uses 3 mana, right? So you'd have to, so you make infinite mana and then you draw infinite cards.
Yes, okay. Yes, absolutely. You make an arbitrarily large amount of mana and then draw however many cards you need to win the game.
Okay. So on Adrian's side of the table, he's got 4 Cages, 3 Witchbane Orb, 2 Tormod's Crypts, 2 Metamorph, 2 Thorn of Amethyst, and 2 Dismember.
Well, Dismember is going to actually be able to take down Salvagers, which is good because that huge backside could prove to be a problem. He can't swing into that with things like Phyrexian Revoker until he gets a Steel Overseer pumping his whole team. The Grafdigger's Cage is going to do very little versus Ollie. That's one of the reasons why the blue-white build is so interesting, because it doesn't really need to use its graveyard in the traditional sense. It can just use Salvages to recur stuff, or just win through attacking. Witchbane Orb is largely in there to stop Hurkyl's Recall, which Ollie not having access to, at least not in any large number. I don't even see a single copy main deck. So it looks like he's just on the Destroy Artifact plan here. He's either going to destroy them or bounce them with the Aether Spellbomb. Hurkyl's is usually pretty good versus Blightsteel as an answer, and that's probably why he doesn't have it, is because he feels the Aether Spellbomb is going to be able to answer it. And he's got 4 Trinket Mages to go get it, so he's probably going to be able to stop a lot of Blightsteels this tournament.
Do you think Metamorph is going to come in case he needs to copy a Blightsteel, or even a Trinket Mage to go tutor up in any artifact that he has in his deck?
I think it'd be a totally reasonable card to bring in. It's really a question of what is he going to take out. The Arcbound Ravagers are going to be very good here. Lodestone Golem, Tanglewire. It's really all designed to beat decks similar to Ollie's. A card like Frog might not be as attractive because he's got Trinket Mages on the other side and they're just going to trade. But really, if he's got a Skull Clamp on it, you're totally fine with that. You're actually happy to trade there. So I don't think he's going to dilute his list too much. I think the Dismembers will likely come in. Thorn of Amethyst and Phyrexian Metamorph are very interesting. Thorn is actually going to stop Salvagers from creating mana.
Right, so because you got to pay the extra.
Yeah, Sphere of Resistance or Thorn of Amethyst, either way, stops you from actually going infinite with the Bomberman. And that's one of the only downsides of the Lodestone Golem here, is it doesn't stop that, because the Lotus is an artifact. He's able to just recur it, get infinite mana, and then, of course, everything that Lodestone makes cost more doesn't matter, because, I mean, you have an arbitrarily large amount of mana, so you can just pay any kind of taxes on the other side. So we'll see they're looking at their opening 7 here.
Adrian's going to be on the play, and which is really fortunate for him because he can come out with a really, really aggressive start. Ollie only having Force of Will would be able to stop anything important this turn.
It's not unreasonable to board out a card like Force of Will versus Adrian's deck, given that there are so few cards that you're really happy getting 2-for-1 on. More often than not, what you want to do is just remove the problem cards with the card like Disenchanter Swords to Plowshares. So depending on how much Ollie's played against it, that is a possibility. There's really not much that you're going to be happy forcing. I'm a big fan of a card like Pithing Needle against the deck, because then that can stop you from needing to counter all of those Skull Clamps and Arcbound Ravagers. But those are the really dangerous cards. Looks like Adrian's going back, being a little bit more selective, which is good. That last hand was not going to get there. Possibly versus just a moderate draw. If he's opening up with Signal Pest Memnite, unless he has something really explosive after, which of course we didn't see, he's not going to give Ollie any extra information.
Right.
No, but that can get shut down by something as simple as a first turn Trinket Mage.
So let's see what he gets on 6.
Yeah.
Well, he's considering it. Yeah, and he's keeping it.
All right, here we go with the Mox Jet and a Workshop. Much more explosive
Lodestone.
mana. That is one of the strongest plays for any Workshop deck, as a first turn Lodestone Golem. At this point, you're hoping to open up with land and a Mox and a Swords to Plowshares, something along those lines. Oh, we've got lots of acceleration.
Wow, look at all that mana.
Really good. This is perfect. This is the type of thing you need in order to answer it. And a Spell Bomb.
Go ahead and bounce that Golem on his end step, and then unleash the fury that is his final 3 cards.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He's preserving his life here, allowing Adrian to replay it. He's not so much worried about the taxing effect of the Lodestone Golem as the life at this point. He's going to need the time to make that mana pay off. Oh, we've got a different line here. Soul Ring. Now, looking over Ollie's list, I don't recall seeing Mental Misstep. So his list is in a pretty good spot versus standard Workshop decks, but Mental Misstep is actually very, very strong versus Adrian's list. There are a lot of 1-mana cards that you're very happy to be able to stop.
And Lodestone coming back.
Oh wow! Double shop. That's what you want to mull into. Tangle Wire. That is fantastic. That's a very, very good follow-up here. Now, we're looking at Ollie needing to tap down his entire board, and he's going to be eating 5 the next turn, most likely 5 the next turn. That Tangle Wire is absolutely huge. Any further Tangle Wires could potentially just end this in a hurry. Let's see what he's able to do. Flooded Strand, at least that's a little bit of protection against Wasteland, though Adrian's list not very heavy on waste effects.
So Ollie's best potential play next turn is like a Swords to Plowshares, it seems like, depending on what Adrian does.
Well, yeah, it depends on how much pressure he's able to follow up with as well. A single Swords may not be enough. In this instance, it looks like it will be, so yeah, let's see if he can Swords during his upkeep or maybe Disenchant. He's got He's got plenty of mana. So.
What does he have? He has a Mox Pearl, right?
He does have a Pearl. That's interesting that he grabbed the basic island. That may be because of mana drain. Maybe he'll be tapping down his Moxes and leaving 2 blue up and playing another land.
Yeah.
And maybe down the line hoping to snag a expensive spell and using the mana drain mana to really be explosive.
He could have Ancestral in his hand.
Also possible.
Although that's again something he could do on his upkeep.
Yeah, he may want to try and keep some mana open and stop the onslaught on the other side with a counter.
Nope. No, he's tapping 5 things. He's just floating 5 mana.
5 Click. Click is good here.
Yeah.
So there's the reason for the double blue. Click is going to be able to trade with Lodestone Golem, or at least hold it back.
Doesn't Click only cost 4 here?
It does cost 4, but he's going to have to tap for Tangle Wire.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what he's trying to do. I think he floated his mana, resolved the Tangle Wire trigger, and then played the Click. Otherwise, he'd have to tap the Click to the Tangle Wire, and he wouldn't be able to get a block out of it.
Oh, very nice.
There's the line. All right, now we've got Lotus and
Plains.
Plains, so I believe he has a Jace in his hand that could come in as soon as next turn here, unless we see some more disruption from Adrian's side of the board.
Adrian holding on to a legendary mana rock and a mystery card.
Pulling back the lodestone out of the red zone, really considering whether or not the trade is worth it. I'm sure he'd be happy to trade up a Memnite.
Why not?
I think we're going to need to see some kind of disruption or card drawing from Adrian here, or else this game is in danger of swinging completely back in the opposite direction. Ollie's strong opening versus lodestone is actually one of the criticisms of the card. When it first came out, people were concerned that it wasn't going to do enough because it doesn't stop your opponent's really strong openings with artifact acceleration. Of course, it's been proven that it's more than good enough, even though it does have that slight downfall.
Jace.
Keeping up a Plains and an island. At this point, most likely looking to brainstorm into a Swords to Plowshares.
Yep.
In Ollie's list, Jace is going to brainstorm a lot. Fate Sealing is not as attractive in this type of deck because there are so many ways that you can just, oops, I win, especially now that he has the Lotus in the graveyard. If he sees Salvagers at any point, this game could be over in a hurry.
I did see a Disenchant in his hand.
We've got Voltaic Key.
Looked like a beta Disenchant. Classy.
This is a very, very bad spot for Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
Facing down two of the best mythics that we've seen. Though the first time around, Vendilion Click was just a lowly rare.
What were they thinking?
But I think they were thinking of making mythics down the line.
3 to the face, not a Jace.
Alright, we get the Memnite came in, and now we've got a Frogmite. Oh, this seems like a really bad spot.
Yeah. So he's drawing an extra card every turn. He's got the Disenchant in his hand for whenever he needs it. Tap down your green mana, why not? You don't need it.
This is a very, very favorable position for Ollie.
I think he ripped a mana drain.
Yeah, that's just huge. Have Disenchant and mana drain.
And he has a Flooded Strand too, so he can put back 2 potentially less useful cards.
Yeah, one of the only cards I can really see mattering here is Skullclamp. Now the upside here is if Adrian decides to, he can swing in toward Jace. So from his side of the board, it looks like if he swings with his team, he could potentially get rid of both Jace and Vendilion Click. But of course, with that Disenchant, what that will likely turn into is a total blowout.
Yeah.
The board, if Ollie decides to trade up the Click, he'd be able to trade with the Lodestone, Disenchant the Frogmite, and then the board would be Memnite versus Jace. I'm going to take Jace in that battle.
Right.
So it is possible to brick, but he has a fetch land too, so even if he draws terrible, he's going to be able to shuffle it away. Very, very interesting situation here. If he hits Time Vault at any point, the game's over. If he hits Salvagers, he's going to have infinite mana and possibly be able to end the game with that.
Well, he also has the either Spell Bomb in his...
Oh, he already has the Spell Bomb, so he's definitely... Yeah, you're correct. Usually you have to tutor for that thing. He actually had it already, so you're right. It will be game over if he draws Salvagers.
Adrian, considering the play you were just talking about, is it worth getting rid of Jace? I mean, not doing much else, so...
Yeah, I think you have to make this play
here. You have to make the play, yeah.
It's not like Adrian's going to draw a card that's going to somehow protect his guys. He doesn't have a Brave the Elements effect.
Right. So Ollie Disenchanting.
Yep.
Oh.
There we go.
Tilt City.
No extra creatures entered the battlefield there, so no help to Adrian with the mishandling of the deck. We've got Memnite taking Jace down to 1, to 2, and follow up with
naming Jace. Ah, the drain.
Well, there you go. That was close. That was very close. Very interesting.
Yep.
Now he doesn't have another Revoker in his hand, otherwise it would have been coming down, so he's going to need to draw one, or hope that Ollie bricks for the next 2 turns. Of course, he's going to be able to Fate Seal himself if he needs to, and there's no way the Memnite will ever be able to actually kill Jace all by himself.
Right. And Adrian knows that he probably needs to name something better than Jace the Mind Sculptor to really be safe against the Bomberman.
Yeah, it's gonna find him what he needs. If you name Salvagers, Jace is still gonna get you, so it's a really bad spot. He absolutely does need to handle Jace, and he also needs to get Ollie's life total down to 0 before those other cards become an issue.
Yeah.
We'll see if he's got some more damage on board soon. 1 damage a turn is not going to get there. And it's going to be really tough versus another disenchant. Yeah, Ollie's loaded up on disenchants, which I've never really felt good about sleeving up that card. When I was playing Bomberman lists, I did agree that it was the best option. I just really didn't like sleeving it up. It feels like it costs 1 more mana than it should. In this day and age, there's Nature's Claim, there's so many similar effects, and to have to pay 2 mana for disenchant is just rough. Especially compared to a card like Ancient Grudge.
Oh, so this is the, what's the name of this card? Devout Witness.
Alright.
Coming in, what's that card next to it?
Looks like a Scars of Mirrodin Trinket Mage.
Oh, okay. Yep. And how many cards does he have left in his hand?
He's just going to have the 1 artifact that he's to
one artifact that he can discard. Sensei's Top. But Devout Witness has Summoning Sickness anyway, so it's not relevant. So you can just play it.
Alright, so we have yet another artifact that's going to be able to help dig for the combo finish. All of this versus a lowly Memnite.
And he also has Voltaic Key with Sensei's Top, so he's able to actually net card advantage by tapping the top, in response, untapping it with Voltaic Key, tapping it again, replace it, draw a card, put top on top, and then draw the top.
Absolutely. That is one of the lesser known interactions to people who don't play Vintage, and it's a very powerful effect. Netting an extra card per turn is a big deal in a format with as powerful spells as we have here. Wow. This is just a bad spot for Adrian. Ollie has all of the goods, and he has
a Memnite.
But his mana base is certainly capable of putting anything out there that he could want.
Skull Clamp.
Alright.
That's a good one.
That's where it needs to begin. I mean, he definitely needs that in order to go anywhere here.
Tapped his Mox to draw 2 cards. Still got 2 floating that he can cast an artifact with.
And a Signal Pest.
Okay, so he's going to start. And now he's got 2. He's still got a mana floating, draw 2 cards. He can cast a 4-drop and clamp it. Jed clamp it.
Yeah, this is tough because he really has to do something with the Devout Witness there. Otherwise, it's just going to stop everything in its tracks. If he can get another... Oh,
Genesis Chamber.
Look at this scrappiness going on. Ooh, a Ravager. Ravager generating a token. Still got the mana. Draw some more cards.
Are the tokens 1/1s or 2/2s?
They're 1/1s.
Okay, so that's perfect with the Skull Clamp.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is he going to draw cards while he still can? Does he have another artifact? He probably has something to play because he's just been drawing so many. He has already drawn 4 cards this turn. 5 cards, including the... So now he's going to 7 cards this turn.
And one-sided Wheel of Fortunes are fine. I mean, if anything's going to win you the game, it's going to be that.
Now you can drop like a Tolarian Academy or something along those lines, and just play his deck. There's that.
Mox Opal, that's helpful.
That Mox Opal we knew about.
And it's nice now with the new Legend rule, Mox Opals can effectively work as Lotus Petals, which makes this deck a lot more attractive.
Yep, Mana Vault.
Oh,
so
look at
stuff's
that.
happening.
3 more clamps, potentially. Floating 1, it looks like he's got one of his 1-drops. Oh, good, another Skull Clamp. Well, it's really looking up for Adrian here. He certainly has a lot going on. He can potentially double clamp the Ravager and draw 4 cards here.
That's what's going to happen. Draw 4 cards.
Too bad he didn't have another body to put those modular tokens on, but
yeah.
It's only 2 extra damage, nowhere near as important as 4 cards here. Now, he hasn't made another land drop, exactly. So Academy is huge, or if he can spam the board with a bunch of cheap creatures, Cradle would also be huge. A lot of plays from Adrian here, really showing the resiliency of this Robot Affinity list.
Ancient Tomb. Solid.
A typical workshop deck would have had 0 chance from that board position. There's no single card that they could have drawn that would have even been remotely relevant.
Right. Skull Clamp just totally flipped the script.
Let's see what he can do with these 2 Ancient Tomb manas, and he hasn't taken any damage yet, which is big. Even though he's facing down 4 damage a turn, that's not really a threat at this point, being at 20 life and having those 2 Skull Clamps. So this is actually anybody's game at this point. Yeah, looking at Ollie's list, he's got the best cards you could ask for, really.
Oh,
at
more
this
mana.
point, you know, his engineered explosives could help really bail him out of this situation, getting rid of both Skull Clamps. But this is getting out of hand fast.
All the mana.
Wow. And Thorn. Thorn
cuts off the combo. So right now he just established that Ollie cannot combo off next turn.
Yes, even with the Devout Witness, he can only get rid of 1 of those Thorns, and that could really force him to use the Devout Witness on that instead of the Skull Clamp. Very, very interesting.
Ollie's looking at a Soul Ring, a Tundra, and what was that, another Jace or something?
I looked like a Trinket Mage to me, which is
could be a Trinket Mage,
good shuffle effect, but it didn't make it to the top, so he's going to brainstorm into it. Of course, he could always bounce his Trinket Mage and replay it. Oh, there is a Jace there.
And then he also got another Disenchant.
And a Soul Ring. Alright.
Get in there for 2.
Just 2 damage. Putting Adrian down to 16, I believe. There we go.
Gotta start somewhere.
That is a big issue with the Bomberman list, is so many of the sphere effects just stop you from being able to win.
And he did not play his Sol Ring because he wants to discard it to the Devout Witness and be able to cast his Disenchant this turn. He's given himself a lot of options, and he doesn't actually need the extra 2 mana.
And it wouldn't have netted him 2 mana this turn anyways. He would have had to pay 3 mana just to get out the Soul Ring, so really not an attractive card at this point. Oh.
Phyrexian Revoker, what's he going to name?
Wow.
Either Jace or Black Lotus. I mean, he can't make infinite mana without the Lotus.
Yeah.
Do we know?
No, there's no infinite mana without the Lotus. But he.
Oh, he named Devout Witness.
In a case like that, Salvagers would be a reasonable card to name if you were really worried about recursion, because it can recur the Aether Spellbomb as many times as he needs to. Wow, that is really good. So Ollie not responding with the Devout Witness means that he doesn't get any activations out of it.
Yep.
And the Arcbound Ravager.
Can sacrifice his mana crypt so he doesn't have to take any more damage.
Yeah, I think we're a little ways away from that territory. He's probably going to ride the line really hard with that. The mana that allows Skull Clamp to equip, very valuable right now. Compared to the Workshop mana, you really want to be clamping stuff away.
That's true.
To try and get there. every new card he draws is potentially going to create multiple bodies and even more cards, and it just grows.
So you drew 7 cards last turn, and you just already drawn 5 this turn. I don't know of decks that can really compete with that. And he established mana denial with the Thorns of Amethyst.
Oh, and a Lodestone.
And a Lodestone. Really just locking Ollie out of the game piece by piece. And then developing. Now, Steel Overseer could make all of his 1/1s giant.
Well, Ravager's potentially going to be lethal just from swinging at this point. It's really getting gruesome. He can swing, make Ravager huge with another guy, and then even if Ollie has a disenchant, he could always just sack him and throw the counters on the other attacker. So Ravager really allows you to play around a lot of stuff and get in there for lethal.
He needs 3 attackers because of the
Devout Witness.
Devout Witness.
Yeah, it may not be this turn. He'd probably swing, have the Devout Witness block, and be happy just getting rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's fine just drawing his whole deck right here. Yeah, putting an insane amount of pressure on the board past the turn. You know, all he gets to... I mean, all he does get to draw, let's see, 2 extra cards, up to 3 extra cards, because he can use top on his end step with the Voltaic Key trick, replay it, do the top trick again, and draw with Jace.
Yeah, it's not as attractive due to the thorns to be able to pick that top up and put it back down.
Right.
There's only so many plays Ollie's going to be able to make per turn when each play costs at least 2 to 3 mana. So this is very restrictive. Ollie's going to be looking for Time Vault or Auriok Salvagers. Now the Revoker is on Jace right now, is that correct?
Yeah, there should be 1 on Witness and 1 on Jace.
1 on Witness and 1 on Jace.
We've only seen 1 Revoker so far.
Okay, so we're on the Witness right now.
Oh, and he did drop a Gaia's Cradle.
Cradle is just amazing in this deck. He's gone back and forth in between 2 and 3. It's an interesting choice in terms of how many, but it's definitely going to be at least 2 in a list like this. It's just potentially so broken. Not quite as broken as Solarian Academy, but the fact that you can play multiples is just crazy.
Yeah. Still going to get the job done. And Adrian still has so much mana available. Like, he's got Ancient Tomb, a Mox Pearl, a Mana Crypt that he hasn't used this turn. Like, he can he could draw like 4 or 6 more cards still.
Oh, easily. Every creature he can draw at least 2 to 4 cards off of. Even things that have higher toughness, he can just put the clamp on it. I mean, he could double clamp Lodestone and sack it to Ravager and get 4 cards out of it. It's a very, very explosive state here. I mean, pretty much all the trade-offs are on Adrian's side, whether or not he wants the extra board presence or the extra cards. Ollie has very little to say about things at this point. Almost being locked out of the game.
At this point, Adrian's deck reminds me a lot of Legacy Elf decks, where there's just so much going on, so many triggers, so many card drawing instances, and so much mana available that you really have to be like a high caliber player just to keep track of all the stuff that's going on. What has summoning sickness, what doesn't, because his turn, he's doing so much stuff, but it's actually taking a lot of time because he's making all the careful and correct plays and considering all his routes, all his paths to victory. So there's a lot to keep track of this turn.
Yeah, this is in a lot of ways similar to the Legacy Elf lists, and I actually think if you want to play something explosive like that, this is definitely the way to go. Elves actually struggles very, very hard versus Workshop decks in general and Vintage. It is a possible budget option, but I definitely like this. This is a real Vintage deck. There's no doubt about it. It's got all of the most powerful mana acceleration with Workshop and Cradle and Academy, full power, even down to the Mox Opal. I mean, the deck is just unbelievably powerful and explosive.
Looks like he has 2 mana left, and he's Is he passing the turn, or is he? What is he? He probably has like a full grip, and yeah. I mean, he has a full grip, so is there value to drawing more cards this turn? And he might decide there is. He needs to drop another Arcbound Ravager for next turn to be completely lethal. Because if Ollie leaves Trinket Mage and Devout Witness up, he's got 2 blockers, so he could block a Ravager so that Adrian's forced to sack the Ravager to make something else strong that gets through. And then he has the Disenchant, and Modular doesn't travel beyond the second robot, so he's just using it now.
He's freeing up his Devout Witness to be able to use that. So he killed the Revoker. Devout Witness is back online. Jace is presumably going to come back online, but that's going to leave Adrian with both Skull Clamps, so it's a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Ollie, I think, is looking at how to win the game, not how to stop Adrian from winning, which has got to be the right line here.
Right.
I mean, there's no way that you're going to be able to stop Adrian from being effective at this point. He has everything going for him. I mean, realistically, you'd need to get rid of both Skull Clamps and almost the entire team.
Yeah, like just as far as Ollie just freeing himself up to win the game, he needs to get rid of those thorns. The Lodestone Golem is a little tricky because it makes the Salvager cost more, but his artifact spells don't cost more. He's getting rid of the Lodestone, which Adrian is using it to make a modular token.
Yeah, so he's going to have another Disenchant effect at least on his turn. I don't agree with that. I think he probably should have freed up the Jace. The extra card would go very well with the Devout Witness. I see, now
he's getting the Jace free.
Now he's doing it. He really wants to draw Engineered Explosives here.
Oh yeah, EE at 2. Like you said, he could cast it at 0, pay a blue and a white for the additional tax, and then the Sunburst would be 2.
Yeah, get rid of the Genesis Chamber, the Ravager, both Thorns, leave him in a much more manageable state. He'd be facing down a decent-sized Memnite and the Skull Clamps. But those Skull Clamps are going to have to go soon. Otherwise, they are just going to continue fueling.
Now he's looking with top.
He sees Tolarian Academy.
Putting the Force of Will way down on the bottom.
Yeah, that's a big part of the reason why I'm not a huge fan of the card. It's certainly not going to help you when you're behind, and it may not really be able to stop
doing the double draw trick.
Be able to play Academy here. It's going to tap for a good amount of mana.
3/4.
So that top is
3 casting cost top. So she's got 1 floating. She can use to spin the top. Double Force of Will.
Yeah.
That is not as good as a double rainbow.
Nowhere near it.
Yeah, that's. I think that's gonna be
it's a really
gonna seal
bad
the deal for Ollie.
It's a really, really bad spot now. He's only got the 1 blocker. Adrian can get rid of Jace if he wants. He can get rid of potentially Ollie if he wants. We'll see what route he goes.
Yep.
He's got a lot of artifacts that he can sack. The Devout Witness is tapped.
Gonna take, even if he takes 3 on his upkeep, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I really disagree with not leaving the Devout Witness open. I think getting rid of the Lodestone didn't do very much. To get rid of that in the end step, if instead the Lodestone were still in play and the Devout Witness were untapped, then he'd be able to at least play around this upcoming Ravager.
Yeah.
You know, just absolute blowout. If he swings with everything here, Ollie has 2 blue open, and he can just swing and shift the modular counters over. He had the ability to break up the play on board. I just think it was a little too greedy there.
Mm-hmm.
He could have given himself more time. But a bad spot regardless. He certainly wouldn't call that a punt or anything. Possibly could have given him an extra draw step.
Yeah. I mean, what one card could he have drawn? Do you think that would changed everything? Because he still had to deal with double Thorn to free up his combo.
Well, Time Ball or Tinker.
Engineer explosives, right?
Explosives definitely would have helped. It would have cleared out a lot of guys. But Time Vault or Tinker would have just ended the game. So when you have lineups like that, I think you've got to give yourself those extra draw steps. Now, if Adrian swings towards Jace, then that's even more time. Granted, you lose your Jace, so you're not going to see as many cards. But compared to not seeing any cards, it's certainly a lot more.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about the fact that he can just take infinite turns with the classic Time Vault key.
Yeah, he'd just eventually find his way out with engineered explosives.
Mm-hmm.
And with Sensei's top, it's actually impossible that he would not get there, because he'd be able to make sure. Worst case scenario, I mean, he could literally take infinite turns, because he could just make it so Blightsteel is the last card in his deck, and he could have 7 cards in hand, and then he could draw Blightsteel, swing with the team,
discard,
and then discard, and just literally, even if Adrian was at infinite, 10 billion life, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
He could actually, at that point, just set up the loop, because there's no other interactions. Just explain to the opponent, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw this card. It's Blightsteel Colossus, and I'll discard it every turn, and I'll just attack for 10.
Right.
And do that.
Reasonable shortcut, because actually going through that would be extremely time-consuming, and, as an opponent, you have to realize, like, okay, my opponent did this. He has all these cards, and, he's explaining how he's going to do it. I'm not going to make him manually go through the process.
At that point, you couldn't even force them to do it. It's a reasonable shortcut, similar to if somebody says they're going to tap and untap something an arbitrarily large number of times. You couldn't insist that they physically do it.
Right.
There's no possibility. Of course, you're always free to stop your opponent at any point during the loop. Say, I'll let you do it 1,000 times. Now I'm going to respond, but it's not like Adrian's going to have any responses in that.
I've seen people at Star Cities make their opponent go through the motions. I saw someone was playing an Omniscience deck with Petals of Insight, and their opponent actually made them go through and stack their deck.
That's fine. So with Petals of Insight, things do change. It's not a clean loop. It's not like tapping and untapping with, like, for example, Voltaic Key. If for some reason you had a combo that involved tapping Voltaic Key to untap Voltaic Key, and you need to do that, say, 1,000,000 times,
right,
you couldn't say to your opponent, you need to physically do that 1,000,000 times. You just declare your intention, and then if they want to break it up, they can. With Petals of Insight, things do change every time, so it is a completely different situation.
The combo there being you set up Petals of Insight so that you set up your deck so that you Burning Wish for a Grape Shot, because you're actually recasting Petals every time. So really all you need to do is find a Burning Wish. But you just loop through your deck, however many times you need to build up a sufficient amount of Storm, and then you find Burning Wish for Grape Shot. Or Tendrils, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and in that instance, you don't know that your opponent has the Burning Wishes left. I mean, it is conceivable that they could sideboard them out. I mean, it's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
But some of Magic's earliest history did involve a very high-profile scoop to an opponent that actually couldn't kill them very early on, with Mike Long playing Frostbloom, had burned his Drain Life early in order to fuel I believe it was Contagion at the time. But anyways, he had already lost that card, so he had no way of killing his opponent, and he set up the loops that would eventually take his opponent down, and the person scooped, not wanting to force him to play it out, which of course is good for coverage. I mean, we certainly don't want to be sitting here while they're going through meaningless motions, but that is far from what's going on here. We've got a force on Phyrexian Revoker. That guy's like Stone Rain with legs. I mean, there it would have come down and named Mox Emerald, really bottlenecking Ollie's mana. Now, he opened up on Cavern in Mox Emerald, really a strike against mana drain, I would say. That's why I'm not a huge fan of it right now.
Yeah.
Getting to double blue from here is quite a stretch. If he had Mental Misstep, it would be much more effective at shutting down the cards he's going to be worried about, like Skull Clamp. Signal Pest would also be a lot of extra damage here. So let's see, Skull Clamp. So there's the textbook example of the cheaper counters prevailing, and that's why Force of Will is so good. 0 mana is just unreasonably good on turn 1. And then a Ravager.
Ravager.
So this is legit. We've got everything that he needs. This is a very bad spot.
3, 4, 5 mana off of the Tolarian Academy.
Yep, he's going to be able to start clamping away. Well, this match has certainly turned around from a first turn Blightsteel that just ended it in a hurry to a second game that looked like Adrian couldn't possibly do anything, and he clawed his way back in with Skull Clamp, and now he's the one getting the amazing draw, really punishing Ollie for a compromised mana base in a counter-heavy hand versus a deck that really doesn't care about counters that much.
Right.
Tangle Wire, that's just devastating. That could be enough right there.
Yeah. I mean, what does he tap? He taps Tangle Wire, Skull Clamp, and Mox Sapphire.
Yeah, we're going to have 2 turns.
Or the Ravager.
Yeah, I mean, it's really...
the Sapphire.
You're losing a single mana source there. You've got plenty of mana due to the Academy.
Right.
Not that he needs blue, but even if he did, he's going to have plenty of it. It's all colorless in his deck. Except for the Dismember out of the sideboard. Can't imagine he's actually paying black mana very often for that.
No, he's just got the Jet and the Lotus, and it's probably not worth the extra mana most of the time.
So here we go with a Workshop as well, more explosive mana. Using that instead of the mana that can clamp stuff away.
Right.
We've got a Genesis Chamber, and do we see more guys? Interesting spot.
So he's choosing to use his Academy here, even though he's going to play more artifacts.
Yeah, that is an interesting choice. I probably would have liked to seen him use the Ancient Tomb instead.
Well, he's using 4 mana right now, or 3 mana.
Okay,
4
so
mana.
It's for a Lodestone, so that makes a lot more sense.
He didn't have the option of playing Lodestone otherwise.
If it was going to be a cheaper play, then the Ancient Tomb would have definitely been the correct play. At this point in the game, the life really isn't going to matter, but he needed to have enough to pay for the Lodestone, so definitely playing it.
And he's got his opponent
right now.
On a Tangle Wire Lodestone lock right now.
Looks like he fetched out a basic Plains. That is not going to work. Ollie is hoping to swords the Lodestone Golem now. This is not going to happen.
Unless he has a Mox that he's been sandbagging.
Well, this is just...
Can't even cast that.
Well, this is during Adrian's turn. So he's responding to the Lodestone Golem. He can only target the Ravager here.
Yeah. You got it.
I mean, it's definitely trying to stay afloat. I don't agree with the play. I think the Lodestone Golem is going to be the scarier card in that situation.
So the Lodestone is able to trigger a Genesis Chamber token. It's artifact creatures.
It's any non-token creature on your side. Here comes another Ravager.
Yeah.
This is very bad. This is very, very bad.
Yep.
Yeah, that Lodestone Golem is going to keep Ollie off of all of his meaningful plays.
Well, he's got to tap down 3 things on his upkeep and then
pay 1 more for whatever else he does.
Adrian has just way too many cards. He's dropping them. He's just got too many things to do.
Yeah, this is...
I can't even hold all these cards I want to play. It's just got so much going on right now.
Yeah, thankfully I was operating as the judge. I was not called over to hold the excess cards. That is appreciated. Alright, so we're clamping up Lodestone.
Oh, and he could...
Yeah, he can respond to any removal now. If Ollie does get a swords, he can just respond and get the 2 extra cards out of it.
Right, Ollie's like, oh hey, here's my mana. Could have used this back when Drain was relevant.
Yeah, this definitely does showcase some of the issues with Drain. I'm not against the card in general. I do run a couple of copies in my Grixis list that I'm currently on. But 4 is sometimes a bit much, and it looked like Ollie had a very reactive hand versus a deck that just has way too many things to target. I mean, yes, you'd like to swords both the Ravager and the Lodestone from that previous board state, but it just... there's not enough swords. And even with Snapcasters, there's not enough mana to do all of that swordsing.
Right. So Adrian's just got so much mana and so many cards.
Mana Vault is such a good card in his list.
Right, he never has to pay the life because he can just sack it to the Ravager. He's got double Genesis Chamber now.
It's like some kind of insane dark ritual because not only does it make the 3 mana, it also lets you sacrifice it to the Ravager so it pumps them. It's just so good. And you know, it fuels Academy, so like if that was a dark ritual, he would have paid 1 and netted 2 extra black mana. Instead, he's paying 1 that is already neutral because it gives an extra artifact for Academy. So now you're just pure 3 extra mana out of it, and you're able to sack it. So it's about the sickest ritual ever in Adrian's list. So good. Actually better than Black Lotus in his list a lot of the time.
He's just cracking in for, what is that, 8 right now? Potentially more.
Yeah, half of Ollie's life total falling off right now. And he's going to need to tap down half of his mana base, and Lodestone Golem is still staring him down.
But
so.
he played another Tangle Wire.
Oh, this is over.
Yeah.
This is over. They don't print cards that get out of this.
Nope, not yet.
We're waiting. Vintage players are waiting. Maybe someday.
Need something that has like a channel ability that destroys an artifact.
Absolutely. They may do that someday. That would be a very interesting effect.
I read something about that was a card Rich Shea was asking for in an article he wrote one time. I think the way he put it was the card could literally be anything, even a ham sandwich, as long as it had channel destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very much what Ingot Chewer tries to do. Is it tries to just actually destroy artifacts a lot of the time. Difference is its sorcery speed.
Ollie's showing him the goods.
Yeah, there we go. That stuff is not going to get there.
Nope.
Trinket Mages.
And what's that last one? Swords? Something?
It looks like a Salvagers.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that is if you're afraid of the Bomberman list, that is probably why. As far as playing it, that's the exact type of hand you don't want, where you've got the clunky creatures and they don't do anything. That's the real concern with the list. Of course, we saw in the first game the power of running a deck with Tinker and Blightsteel and a bunch of counters.
So Adrian Becker taking down round 1 with his robot list. Pretty sweet list in my opinion. So we'll be back for round 2. Thanks for watching round 1, and we'll see you in the next video.